Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach Nuff channel. Didn't mean to go that. Try again. Alright, welcome back to the SuperCoach Nuff channel. In today's video, we've got the NRL SuperCoach stock market for round 7. So I guess this is the time where we're really starting to look at upgrading our teams. So cashing out our peaked cash cows, maybe looking for those fallen premiums, or in some cases, looking to just bring in an out and out gun. So as usual, we'll kick off with the hookers and the 5,000k and over range. Top of the list there, you can see Jeremy Marshall King. So, 3 round average of 58. That's pretty solid. He's still got a bit of cash to make, so a solid pot option. If you're looking at someone around that sort of price range. Another option, Reed Marnie. So, he went quite well on the weekend. Obviously, a lot of defence against Souths. Also, I think he had a try assist there for Matt Burton. So, another little pot option there, perhaps. Appy Carousel. So I forgot to put that he was on the bye this week. The Tigers are on bye this week, but just looking at his lower 3 round average as well as the overall average, higher break even, I think it's fair to say that he's one we can sort of let go of. Reece Robson, another pot option. So you can see those pot options all averaging around 60, 65, which is on par with Damien Cook. So yeah, obviously, his score was boosted by a good attacking performance against the Dogs. But, his price will still dip slightly based on averages. But he's a gun. So, if you want to get him in, you can get him in at any time. Same thing with Harry Grant. His scores are a little bit up and down recently, as you can see from the 3 round average of 63. But he's a gun, so we're not worried about him. And Wade Egan, unfortunately, another HIA. So, he's definitely in that pod category as well, just, based on his overall season average. But he's going to have that slightly lower score in his average for the next couple of weeks, which will see his price dip. So it could be an opportunity to get on, particularly if you missed out on his first sort of wave of price rises. Excuse me. And then to the cheaper options, so less than 500k. And so KO Weeks is at the top there. Obviously, was helped by Josh Schuster being out again. Was actually named to start at 6. This week he's reverted back to the bench spot. So not quite sure what Seabob's doing there. I know Schuster's been named in the reserves as well, so he might even be a chance of playing. And so for that reason, I've got the trap symbol on him again. You did well if you got that 60 points out of him the other week, but um, it wouldn't be something I'd be banking on long term. So Sonny Luke, so I've given him the best buy symbol here. His average and his 3 round average in particular is still quite low because of the low scoring game. He played 4 minutes in. I think he might have had HIA issue there. But yeah, I think now Panthers attack is really starting to click. He's only going to benefit from that with his creativity and that from dummy half. So if you are looking for a downgrade option this week, and it's definitely something I'm considering um, as one way of upgrading elsewhere, you could do worse than going down to Sonny Luke and getting some of those cash rises and points, and more so in the next couple of weeks. Hands from Parramatta, I've got him as a trap. So after his debut, he scored a try, scored quite well. Really hasn't done much. Hasn't made any money. So yeah, I think if you've got him and you've got the money to go up to Luke, I'd make that move, get out of that as soon as you can. The cheese, so I've got him on the chopping block this week. I guess I've tried to give him a chance, but the average there of 50. Still isn't quite where we want it. Um, 3 round average, sorry, 50 is not quite where we want it. So I think it's time to sort of cut our losses. And like I said, I'm looking at uh, trading him out for Sonny Luke to sort of use that cash elsewhere. And so on to the front rowers, and at the top of the list we've got the king, Payne Haas. As you can see, he is a must-have. Uh, if you need any more convincing, just look at how much higher his average is than the other quote-unquote premium front rowers, and he's still got a somewhat positive break even. So um, yeah, if you haven't got him, you have to get him in. He's the one I'm targeting this week. I know a lot of people, are looking to get in Nico Hines, but I'd almost have Payne Haas on a par just because he's that much better than everyone else in the position. You could argue that Hines and Cleary are of a similar level, so if you've already got Cleary, you could potentially run with that for a while. But in saying that, obviously, I think you do have to have them both in. But we'll talk about that more in the halfback section. Max King is deservedly up in the 600k plus area. He's been really good this season, real solid average, comparable with the other sort of premiums here. So really good pot option, I believe. Joey Tarpany obviously missed last week with the birth of his child, so congratulations to you. Unfortunately, it cost me a few points in my SuperCoach side this week, but I guess it wasn't just your fault. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, he's a gun, so that's fine. Tino also a gun. He's just rolling along doing his thing. Um, I guess the reason why he's probably on the bottom of this list, if I was to rank these top five, would just purely be because he's slightly elevated price, but also the fact that he will definitely be playing Origin. So, yeah, but if you've got him, well done. I would love to have him, but after this week, as I said, I'm going to have 3 of these guys, so I don't think I can quite afford 4 in the future, but you never know. And Tohu Harris, he's been out again the last couple of weeks. Looks like he's named to play this week, so maybe just keep an eye out on the late mail. But if you've got him, just hold him. As soon as he gets back on the field, he'll bang out big scores for us, play 80 minutes, all that sort of good stuff. So into the mid-range section, so somewhere between 4 and 600k. And so Griffin Neem is at the top of the list. And it's more so just to say that, he's injured. So if you did have him, you've probably made some money, which has been nice. But you do have to look at cutting him. Cohen Hess is next on the list, so you might think, well, Cowboys as well. Bit of an opportunity to move up in price, but I've actually got the trap symbol on him. His average, 3 round average, you can see is a bit elevated by his score last week, which included a try. Um, and now that Jeremiah Nanai is back, I feel like they're going to target his side a bit more, so Cohen Hess won't have as much attack. They've also got Jordan McLean coming back soon, and one other whose name escapes me. Uh, yeah, apologies to whoever you are. But yeah, so that'll obviously impact potential minutes there as well. So put the trap on him. He's one I did flirt with in preseason as a sneaky pot in the front row, but I don't think it's going to work out. He's never got the work rate. Leo Thompson, so he's just continuing to chug along, do his thing. I've got the slow burn symbol on him because he's still going to make some money, but it's not going to be a lot. It's not going to be in a hurry. Um, so if you've got him, hold. If you don't, I wouldn't worry about getting on. Tommy Gilbert, so I guess proven to be the pod that everyone expected him to be at the start of the season. Um, yeah, so the Dolphins are still doing well even without Sean O'Sullivan. That'll come back into the conversation a bit later. Um, but yeah, dual position as well, which is really handy. So you could do worse than have Tommy Gilbert. Waria Hargraves from the Roosters. I'm just going to pass on him. The average is only about 50, and it's probably not quite premium sort of average. At the same time, he's still got a fair bit of cash on him there at 450, so we could probably use that money better elsewhere. And saying that, Christian Welsh with a similar average, a similar um, price point. I've got the pod symbol on him. Probably, it's probably one we can start looking at moving on from. I guess maybe just because I do like the player a bit. I'm trying to be a bit generous to him. But Lindsay Collins is looking like a nice little pot option too. Obviously a bit more expensive, but he is returning that higher average and I guess getting the points out of that pack of the Roosters. So out of those two, Welsh and Collins, I'd go with Collins. But I can see why people would want to hang on to Christian Welsh. Stefano Udikamani, obviously on the bye this week as well. So again, didn't put that designation on him, but he has peaked in price. So I know for myself, he is an option to trade out to get up to paying Haas. I think I do have another avenue to do that, so I am happy to hold on to him as my fourth front row forward, which you know does mean there's a lot of money in my front row. But as you'll see in a bit, probably not a lot in the range of cheap options in the front row. Um, that I'm happy to sort of have in the side. So he'll probably stay, but if you do want to use the cash and move on, I absolutely understand. Jake Travojevic, Gerbo. So I've got him as a pot option there again, sort of like in the Tommy Gilbert frame. Obviously not as high an average, um, but I guess he does play, even though he's still wearing he's wearing the 10. I think he is this season. He's playing in the front row. He's still playing like that lock forward sort of role. So um, yeah, I guess a low end pot. He's a good kid too. I mean, at the end of the day, so yeah, that always counts for something. Fanua Blake, Campbell Gillard, give them the chop. I think if you've got them, similar conversation to Wairua Hargraves. There's just better options at higher average. You can use that money better elsewhere, I think. The last one there, Ruben Cotter. I've just got the weight symbol on him. So obviously, his average and and that isn't quite there yet. So if you haven't got him, you can wait for him to bottom out in price. That fall in premium sort of idea. But at the same time, I do want to see his work rate. Well, not work rate, sorry, his minutes increase a bit. His work rate's always really good. He's just probably not getting the minutes, but obviously come back from injury, they're probably easing him into it. So when you see the minutes ramp up and obviously the scores ramp up with it, get on at that point. And on to the cheap front row forwards. So um, Smith from the Panthers, he's on the bubble, so I've got him as the best buy in the front row if you are looking to downgrade. So maybe, for example, you might be like myself and got Stefano and Sean Kepi. You might want to downgrade one to Smith and upgrade the other to a Payne Haas type. You could make that sort of move. Um, yeah, so I think Fisher Harris, sorry, is still a couple of weeks away, so he's got a couple more weeks of growth, and then probably could potentially drop out of the team, and then obviously, isn't costing you any money, but obviously isn't making you any points either. Tom Haley, I've got as the trap. Just had a elevated score due to playing more minutes. But Tohu's not far off coming back, and that's obviously going to impact all of the Warriors' forward pack minutes. So, uh, yeah, if you're looking at him as a pod sort of cheap front rower instead of Smith, I'd go the other way and go with Smith. Although another potential option, if you've got a little bit more cash to play with, is Hame Saleh from the Rabbitohs. So as you can see there, an average of 30 means he's not going to set the world on fire. It's going to be a slow burn, but if you just want that steady hand, I believe he's dual position as well. So gives you that bit of extra flexibility, a bit like a Sean Keppie. You know, you might want to flick him and bang, what, 30k or so, not ideal. Or you could go a bit cheaper with Murdoch Masilla, but again, you know, he's playing on that edge at the Dragons, but not setting the world on fire, so you could look elsewhere. Moale, so you know he's very quickly going into that category of impact front rower. So yeah, I mean, if you wanted to trade him to Smith to make a bit more cash, I'd be all for that. But yeah, otherwise, you know, I'm going to find it a little bit tricky to get rid of him, I think. So Sean Keppie, so I've got him on the chopping block. He isn't even named in the 17 now that Aaron Woods is there. Um, so, you know, he does offer that dual possession flexibility, which is nice, but if you can get out of him to get to someone else, and I'm pretty sure with a couple other trade or one other trade anyway, I can get from him up to Payne Haas. So I'm definitely going to do that this week. Matt Croker, sorry, his name to start at lock for the Knights, which is interesting. And they've got Kurt Mann and Jack Johns on the bench, but he's peaked in price too. So you know he made 60, 70k, I think, maybe 60k. But yeah, if you wanted to use that cash to move up, that would be okay too. So then on to the premium second row forwards, and so top of the list there, and I think rightfully so, is Cam Murray. So those who traded him out a couple of weeks ago will be absolutely kicking themselves. You know, they might have got Hines in, but obviously, you know, they've missed out on the premium scoring of Cam Murray. So, you know, he's a gun. He's going to go up in cash. So if you want to get on, try to do it as soon as possible. But if you're an owner like myself, just enjoy the good times. Same thing with David Fafita. Everything I just said for Cam Murray, I could repeat for David Fafita. You know, even with Toby Sexton outside of him, he's still killing it. So, um, yeah, get him in. Tyson Frizzell, as you can see, just squeezed into this list right bang on 600k. You know, he's always a pot option. You know, he's never in the elite sort of premium scoring, but you know, he just needs to get over the stripe every so often, and you know, along with his work rate, that means his averages are always up and around the mark. So you could go for sell if you want, but as you can see, there's probably you know quite a few guns that I'd personally go for before I'd look at Frizzell. One of those being Ryan Madison. So you know, it looks like he's playing big minutes in the middle there for Parramatta, um, and yeah, he's just always involved. So you know, with the Parramatta's good draw around the buys, he's definitely one to target going into the Origin period. Definitely, you know, one I've got on my radar. And Britton Nakora would be another one in that category. Obviously, a New Zealand representative, which means that you know he won't be uh, burdened by Origin. And as you can see, he's still averaging 70s, mid 70s. So, you know, get him in whenever you can. I don't think his scoring is going to dip off too much unless there's an unfortunate injury. Eli Katoa, so here's another one where he's peaked in price, but as you can see, that average is up there with the keeper level. So you could look to trade him on if you know you've sort of got a pretty stacked second row. Or you could actually just hang on to him, and you know he's going to keep scoring well. It looks like his work rate's good enough, and obviously he has that attacking ability. So you know that's why I've just put the peaked on him. It's not a definite sell. It's circumstance dependent. So the next few, John Bateman, Olaquatu, Papali, we'll put them all in the same sort of category of pods. Obviously, Bateman and Papali are on the buy um, this week, so you know their price isn't going to change. Olaquatu, obviously, as you can see, has got a little bit of a dip coming, but we know on their day that they can outscore those break evens. So yeah, so if you want to go that option, you certainly can. Khalil Matangi, so I've still got the gun symbol on him, but I guess given that 3 round average, you know, might sort of start to slip back towards pod type territory. And Elliot Yo, I know his average isn't up there, but as we've talked about previously, with Penrith's attacking boost last couple of weeks, he's every chance of getting to that point. So, he is a gun. If you've got him, hold him. If you don't, he's probably the lowest priority in terms of the guns at the moment, just because of his high break even, his lower price, which means, you can get him easier later. And also, he's a shoe in for Origin. So on to the mid-range second row forwards. So Jackson Ford is at the top of the list here after his nice score again on the weekend. So the 3 round average, is sort of where we expected it to be. That 51 average overall still contains, his low HIA score, which is what dragging it down. But you can expect those sort of returns from him, I think. So he's going to make a lot more money. Um, I wouldn't even sort of put the ship sailed on that one just because the job security seems to be there, the scoring seems to be there. Um, so yeah, you can get on and enjoy that. Same thing with Jacob Preston. He's still doing all right. Like even though the Bulldogs were outplayed, I think he's still got about a 60. So he's averaging that for the season. Almost makes him a sneaky little pot option there. But he's still going to make a bit more cash. So you've got a couple of weeks to decide what you want to do with him or how you want to flip him if that's the case. But Zach Hosking, I think the ship has sailed on that pick. Obviously boosted up about 90k or so after last week's performance. But the break even of 33 means that that the price rise is going to finish quite quickly. And also both Liam Martin and Luke Garner are sitting on the reserves bench for Penrith this week. So, unless you have some clear guidance around whether he is locked in on that left edge, um, I'd steer clear of that pick. If you got on him, well done. If you didn't, well, you just got to cut your losses, I think. Trent Liero, so I've got him on the chopping block. He does have a little bit more cash to make, so you could hold a week, but he's just doing it very slowly. So, um, you can still go from him to Ford and make money, and then obviously increased average, increased cash over the next few weeks. I think that's a smarter move. So the Cardi Party, Bryce Cartwright, it's still going. He's still making money. He's still playing big minutes on that edge. So yeah, if you've got him, congratulations. Just ride out the wave. Yeah, he seems to be doing well. Josh King. So looking at his average, you've got to sort of suggest he's a bit of a pot option. Whether you'd rush to bring him in, I'm not sure, but yeah, if you sort of like the cut of his jib, you could do worse than bring him in. Tavanga, I've got the pass on just because again, I think Tohu's back this week. I think this is the same thing I said last week. He's still play solid minutes, decent PPM, but Tohu obviously takes away from everyone else. Lachlan Fitzgibbon, so I think he's peaked in price. So if you see him as a pot option, sort of similar to Katoa, you could keep him. If you wanted to move him on, you could absolutely do that too. And then the last few are all sort of cuts. So Hopgood, he's obviously not getting the workload that he was at the start. So I think you've got to get out of that pick and take the money and run. Kurt Catewell, so he's come back to earth a bit last week after the loss to the Raiders. And I sort of never really had him as a viable option. Nat Butcher, I've got as a chop. He's going to lose a bit of cash, and then also I'm pretty sure Angus Crichton's coming back into New South Wales Cup this week. Satili Tupanua played last week, so they can't be too far off pushing their way back into the starting side on those edges, which will obviously then put Nat Butcher back to the bench playing that middle forward sort of role. And Pat Carrigan, he just probably has been a little bit disappointing with his scoring. Um, so I think you got to get out of that pick too. There's obviously other options where you can make money and points on Pat Carrigan. So then on to the cheapy options, and there's not a lot to look at, I suppose. Probably the best two shouts are the top two, so Jacob Host and Jack Johns. So both averaging 47, interestingly enough, both with similar break evens. Obviously, Johns is a little bit cheaper, but Jacob Host is starting on that edge for South. And interestingly, Jai Arrow was named in the front row, so it might suggest that Host could get some decent minutes on that edge. Um, so yeah, so whichever one you want to use. I went Jack Johns last week just because he was about another 30 grand cheaper. And with Brayley out, I guess the hope is that Kurt Mann will be um, spelling in the hooking role a bit, which will free up Johns to play a bit more 13, sort of in the middle. So, lots of defence and that sort of stuff. Toby Couchman, so he's continuing to make a little bit of cash. So, a bit cheaper if you really just need to downgrade. Um, get as much cash as you can and get, a playing option. Seems like he's fairly well locked in the 17, and they're just sort of, gradually upgrading his minutes. Sean Blaw's on the bye this week. He's still got a bit of cash to make, so you can't hold. He seems to be doing all right in that bench sort of role, playing in the middle, maybe as like a lock forward type position. They give him a little bit of license. He definitely has the skill and the talent for that sort of stuff, so it could work out. Mitch Dunn, I've got him because he was the guy on the bubble, I suppose. Starting in the front row for the Cowboys, which I think is interesting. But with that high break even, he's probably an avoid. I'd rather go with one of the top two that are guaranteed to make a little bit more cash over the next few weeks. So on to the halfbacks, and you can see at the top of the list we've got Braden Trindle. So even though nice average, massively negative break even, he's on the chopping block. Um, I guess just because there's a few better options listed below, and he's not even named in the 17 this week, so not even a chance of getting that little cash bump that I guess if you were holding on to him you'd hope for. Next on the list, Nathan Cleary. So 3 round average of 120 pretty much says it all. Still got a negative break even, so it's one of those things. If you haven't got it on him, get on him as soon as possible because his price is going to push up towards the $1 million mark. He's an absolute gun. Jaron Pezzett is next on the list at 296k. He's named to play 5'8 this week for the Storm. With a little bit of a reshuffle there. So he's still got a negative break even, which means he's going to make some cash. But I guess the issue is the next man on the list. So Nico Hines. So this is the week where his price is going to start changing. As you can see, he's averaged 141 across the 2 games he's played. Break even of 0. Um, so yeah, so it's sort of hard to have these guys like Trindle and Pezzett in the side when you really want to have Cleary and Hines. I think as the two options. You can see I've listed a few pods there, but I think if you're being serious about it, you're going to have Cleary and Hines in the team by the end of the season. I know you could argue, holding off on one of them until post Origin, because I'm pretty sure that they could very well be the 6 and 7 for New South Wales. Um, but I think the points that they're gonna to outscore in the other weeks leading up to Origin, or against all the other options, it sort of weighs it out in the end. So, um, yeah, if you want to run the one gun sort of strategy at halfback, you can, but I think you've honestly got to seriously consider having those two positions filled with those two guys because they're just heads above the rest of the competition. So Ben Hunt, so I did have the trap symbol on him last week. I've got him as a bit more of a pod option. I think I haven't watched the game, the Dragons against the Titans. He is the main man. They've obviously got a young-ish spine around him. So he really is the one calling the shots, and he's not afraid to run the ball at the line, which is, I guess, a trait you want in your Supercoach halfbacks. But I wouldn't have him over the two I've previously talked about. Sean Johnson, is maybe that one exception to the rule. As I said, if you wanted to carry one of the guns with SJ going into the Origin period, I could totally understand that. Obviously, Sean Johnson won't play Origin, being the New Zealand halfback. So he is a decent pod. Tanner Boyd, so I could have included him in the hooker section. Probably more appropriate, I think, at this point of the season. He's just slowly building cash. I think even at the hooker position, though, there is better options. So, um, probably one to get out of sooner rather than later. Mitchell Moses, I've got the roller coaster symbol on him, so his scores will be up and down. So if you're going that direction, that's what you can expect. Um, but again, I wouldn't go there. Excuse me. Sam Walker, he's on the chopping block. He just doesn't have the attacking output. Probably, I guess, needs to be running the ball at the line a bit more. He's probably more the style in line with Reynolds, the next one on our list. So, the trap, and obviously you can see his 3 round averages dip down to 51. That's probably more indicative of what we would expect from him. So, you get out of that if you've still got him. DCE I've got as a pod, but as you can see, his 3 round averages dipped right down to 60. Um, so, probably, not really a realistic super coach option, more of an NRL fantasy type with his dominant kicking game. And Jerome Hughes is in a similar boat, so I've got him as a pod, but obviously his averages in there. He's more capable of that upside, though, because of his running game. So that's why I guess, he is included as a pod. But yeah, essentially, I think if you're not going Cleary and Hines, I think the only viable options are to either have SJ at the HFB2 spot, um, or Pezzett for that cash generation. But obviously, any cash that Pezzett makes, Cleary and Hines are probably going to make something similar, given their similar break evens and obviously their ability to score more points. Onto the 5'8" positions. So you probably noticed that there wasn't many halfbacks. I've essentially moved all the dual position 5'8" halfbacks into the 5'8" spot. Given that I think your halfbacks really are those two, maybe 3 or 4 options if you include SJ and Pezzett. So your dual position guys are probably only going to be in your 5'8" sort of conversation. So top of the list got Cody Walker. He showed why he was a pot on the weekend. Once South get on that roll, and he's feeling it, he can go absolutely mental. So 3 round average is 96, break even of 0. So good time to get on. We talked a lot so far about the South having a tough start of season draw. That's very soon going to swing. So this could be the ideal time to get on and take that pod for a ride. Jackson Hastings, so he gets the flog symbol as always. If you're really that way inclined and would like to include him in your side, you could, but he's never seen the light of day in my team. Matt Burton, so I guess 2 tries saved his score on the weekend, but the fact that he's scoring 2 tries means that he is a viable Supercoach pot option. In the 5'8" position, again, one that I probably went a bit early on in selling at the start of the season. Tom Dearden, is probably the other sort of pot option when you look at his 3 round average. But obviously, I think I'd have Burton and Cody Walker both ahead of him. And Dewey, another ACL season-ending injury, so best of luck with the recovery on that. But you do have to cut him now. With the price, it's a bit awkward. You sort of have to go up to one of these other guns, or there is a couple of downgrade options which we'll talk about shortly. Munster playing fullback this week, which is interesting. I don't think he'll play enough to get dual position. And even if he did, he's a lock for our 5'8" spot. So as soon as you can get him in, I'd recommend doing so. And Dylan Brown, I've got the gun symbol on him, but confidence is starting to waver. Maybe it's just because he's in my side. Um, but I guess the advantages over the likes of Cody Walker, Matt Burton, is that he does have that better draw through the buys. And also, Burton's always a chance of maybe being that bench utility for Origin because of his size and skill set. Um, so, yeah, I think for that reason, Dylan Brown's not the worst shout. He might become a pod in the coming weeks, just depending on how things play out. But yeah, for now, I've still got him as number two on the list. But only just Cody Walker is very fast catching ground on him there. So on to the cheap options. So for the third week in a row, Josh Schuster top of this list. He's just hanging on that bubble. As soon as he plays, he's going to make cash, but just when that is, we're not sure with the quad injury that he's got. Um, Interestingly enough, he's been named the last 2 weeks and then dropped out. This week he's named in the reserve, so there's every chance that Seabold's just playing a few silly games with the team list and he comes into the starting side. Based on that logic, Isaiah Katoa, so job security is immaculate. He's just going to make that slow burn cash. So if you want to be a bit more aggressive in the 5-8-2 spot, you could go with Schuster. Or there's another option you can see a bit further down the list. Um, Brandon Waker, so he's on the bye this week, but I have mentioned him because of the injury to Adam Dewey. You'd think he'd be the first one in line to take the 5-8 position there at the Tigers. Not saying that's anything fantastic, but I guess he also kicks goals, which could be useful. So it could be a really interesting sort of cheap pot option there. But the best buy this week, which might be a bit controversial, but I don't think so really, is Phoenix Crossland. So with Jaden Braley out, Crossland's been named to play at hooker. Looks like he's going to play big minutes there. They do have Kurt Mann on the bench, um, who he'll probably relieve at some point. I don't think he'll play 80 minutes, but I guess a boost in minutes and that change of position will sort of result in a higher scoring. So if you are looking for a cheap option this week, assuming that Schuster doesn't get up, I'd be targeting Crossland. Um, yeah, I guess you could, if you've got the luxury trade, you could swing Katoa to Crossland and sort of get that quicker cash gen. Probably not something I've got the capacity for this week, but just something to consider. Ezra Mam, Tyson Gamble, you can see they're at the higher end of the scale. Maybe I should have made the 5-8 limit 450 K. But yeah, for that reason, they're just sort of in no man's land. I'm going to pass on both of them. And now onto the centre wings. And so this is where the conversation gets really interesting. As you can see, this first page is just filled with guns and pods because there's so many options. And it's almost a bit of a lottery in a sense of who's going off each week. But when you see the 3 round averages, you can't go too far wrong. So top of the list is Jermaine Azarko. So this is one that I've always sort of been a bit, uh, you know, skeptical on. Surely he can't keep scoring. He's got a history of poor scoring. Um, but sometimes that change of club just changes a player, and I guess Wayne Bennett being there as well might just give him that confidence to play to his potential. He's always had that potential, but just has been a bit error prone in the past, and a bit quiet in games. But he's averaging 85 on the season, 90 across the last 3 rounds. He kicks goals. The Dolphins are still scoring points. He's got a negative break even. So I think I've got to sort of swallow my pride a bit and suggest that he is a gun. Um, I don't think I can call him a pod based on how many people have got on. And if you wanted to, there's still time. As you can see, he's got negative break even. He's averaging 85. So, yeah, I don't know if I've quite got the money to swing it, but yeah, you could do worse than have him in your side. And one I have to sort of say, put my hand up and say, I got wrong. Dom Young, so I've still got him as a pod just because his scoring is a bit up and down. but he still has that massive score from a couple of weeks ago in his 3 rounder, so he's got a negative break even. So if you get on now, you can ride that bit of cash and keep him or flip him. Um, Isaac Targo, so someone I haven't really looked at this season. Obviously, he was a gun cheapie for us last year. But now that Penrith's attack seems to be firing up, that 3 round average of 86 means that he's up in the gun territory. Campbell Graham, so a junk time hat trick essentially against the Dogs, pretty handy boost to his score. But we know that even without that, he still scores well. So he's a gun. You can bring him in whenever you want. Jesse Ramian. So based on his 3 round average, I had to include him in this conversation. He's probably not my first pick as a pod option, but I can understand why people would want to get on him. Greg Marzu. So again, this is sort of in the same category of Zarko. Is he a gun? His job security is a bit iffy, but I think a bit like Dom Young, starting him in reserve grade was a bit of a rocket from Adam O'Brien, and we're now getting the results of that. So I did bring him in. He's averaging 105. He's made a heap of cash. He's going to make a bit more cash. Um, whether he's an end of season keeper is debatable, but if he's playing, he's a gun. He breaks tackles for fun, loves to run the ball. That's what we want from our centre wing players. Speaking of which, Brian Tyler, so, we've always said once the attacking stats come, he's going to be a gun. And sure enough, they finally came on the weekend. So, turned up. His 3 round average is lifted, which means, his price is going up. So, if you want to get on, I'd do so sooner rather than later. The only question is, of course, state of origin coming up with him. Ronaldo Mulatalo, so another sort of pod. He probably doesn't have the base of some of the others, but the Sharks are just so good in attack that you can sort of forgive that. And you can see the stats there are very similar with Ramian. So, I've got them at the same level of pottishness for that reason. But I can see why people would want to get on. Val Holmes, so nice return from him on the weekend, which means his price is going to lift again. He is a gun. Obviously, I downgraded him to Kraz, and I'm happy I did. But if you've got him, I can totally understand why. And Dan Gagai, I had to bring into the conversation as well. An average of 74 across the season, 3 round average of 88. I mean, we can't really ignore those sort of numbers. So he is a pod. But again, probably at his price is a bit expensive. Um, and, I guess the overall average is slightly down from the likes of Graham, Mazarko, and the like. So Nick Meaney, he's actually out this week. Pappenhausen's just around the corner, returning to the side. So I think, this might be an ideal week to chop him. You could sideways him to like an Ozarko or something like that, make money off the trade, and then obviously the cash generation from that will be increased, and then long term the points generation will be greater as well. Lachlan Miller, he's a gun. 3 round average of 92. There's just so many guns at the moment. I've probably picked way too many guns. I might have to, do a deep dive on these guys and probably the second rowers, and really just come up with that, top 5, I reckon, for each category as the guns. But at the moment, the centre wings are scoring ridiculous. I guess that's the new SuperCoach, and something we might have to look at going forward. Um, Jackson Paulo, so his price has peaked, right? So I guess he had a great start to the season, scoring tries and for fun, but I guess now that they're drying up, it's the time where you probably want to start looking to trade him off. There's so many other gun options that are going to give you more consistent scores going forward. Jacob Carraz, he's 51 on the weekend was his absolute base. So, we're happy with that as a base. He's a gun. Don't worry about that score. Ruben Garrick is out with a HIA this week. So I think if you've got him, you just hold. Obviously, with that big negative break even, it does provide an opportunity in a few weeks for those of us non-owners to get him in cheap. So we'll be grateful for that. And speaking of getting people in cheap, Joey Manu, just wait on him. He's going to drop a lot of cash in the next couple of weeks. So once that price is bottomed out, we can then jump on and get him. So the mid ranges, so anywhere from 400 to 600, we're talking here. The top of the list, we've got Phil Sammy from the Titans. And I guess an option I've been toying around with in terms of starting to get out of our cash cows that have peaked in price is a possible sideways flip to Sammy and grab that bit of cash. Obviously, you can see his averages and that aren't keeper level compared to the ridiculous averages we've currently got going on. But with a negative break even of 33, he's going to generate a lot of money over the next couple of weeks. Um, so it could be, just a sneaky trade in, grab some cash, trade it back out for a potential keeper. Charles Nickel Clockstad. So with a 3 round average of 71, I've got the gun symbol on him. Right, so I've got too many guns in the premium range, and I've still got a couple here. But that's why we bought him at the start of the season, was knowing that he had that potential, playing fullback to get up towards premium centre wing sort of option. So if you've got him, hang on and enjoy the ride. Junior Tupou, so he's on the bye this week, but I guess they've talked him up for a while as being a real potential gun. Um, the 3 round average, the break even suggests that he's not the worst shout to get on, but not this week because he's not playing. So you can wait till next week. And again, you could do that sideways trade to do a quick cash grab, I should say. Adam Pompey, I've got him as a cash grab too, but probably the least popular of the options. The one advantage he does have is he does have the ability to kick goals. Obviously, Sean Johnson will kick goals as long as Sean Johnson is playing. But if something was to happen to him during a game, well, Pompey would then come in and collect the points. A little bit cheaper too than Sammy, so if you're a bit short on cash for that upgrade, perhaps Pompey is that option rather than Phil Sammy. Khan Pereira from the Titans, so he's probably got one more week of price rises. He obviously had a super low score this week, but his massive score in a few weeks ago now, I can't remember exactly which round, is still in his 3 round average. So give him another week, and then he's definitely on the chopping block next week. The Hammer. So unfortunately, I traded him out. Didn't have the faith in the Dolphins, and once again they've burnt people, including myself. He's a gun playing fullback. Again, he's a bit like Ozako. Just had to have someone have a bit of faith in him, like Wayne Bennett, and he's flying. So yeah, I'd love to get him back in the team. Don't want to admit I was wrong, but he is a gun, and the average of 72, that's almost keeper level. So um, yeah, if you've got him, just hang on to him. Don't trade him. Don't make the same mistake I did. Taruva, he's starting to make some nice cash again. Penrith attack points. Thanks for coming. Yeah, and he's dual position as well, which has worked out really well for me too. Speaking of which, Jack Bird and Connolly Lemuelu. So I've got them here as dual position options. So on the next page, we'll talk about a few people that are ready to be cut, and a potential option is to use your DPP, and maybe if you've got Bird or Lemuelu in the second row, you can bring them down and bring in one of those cheaper second row options. Because as you'll see as we go through, the centre wing options are a little bit thin, I think. But just good ones to have. I think Jack Bird, average of 60, dual position. He's going to make a bit more cash, so he could be a sneaky little pot option. Lemuelu, so he's got one more week, I think, and then we'll have to see what happens with Felice Kafusi. I had it wrong last week. I thought he had 1 week last week, but had the suspension off by a week. So we'll see how that goes. And Swally, I think we've got a pass just given how many great options there are. He's averaging 55. His break even's about that. Probably not worth a look at this point in time. Onto the next of the second row, so centre wing, sorry, mid ranges. So Selwyn Cobbo, again, he's a bit up and down. Give him a pass. Hayes Perham, so his price is now peaked. So if you wanted to move him on, that would be a good option. Tony Staggs, in the Broncos sort of boat. Obviously, there seems to be a recurring theme with the Broncos players. They had such a good start to the season. Everyone was getting on, or people were getting on, not everyone. But I think now they've had a loss, it's all starting to dip. So you've got to get off those. And if you've still got Adokar, you do have to get off. Got the Foxes being shot. He's out for a couple of months with syndesmosis injury. So best of luck with the recovery, big fella. So onto the cheap options. So I almost want to start from the bottom because you've got Warbrick and Alamotti who have peaked in price. They're probably our targets to cash out. So in terms of our cheap options, what can we do? So I've got Robert Jennings from the Dolphins and Vega, maybe is how you say it, from Manly. Um, they're both playing their first games this week. Uh, and that's why I've got the trap symbol on both of them. So Vega is only filling in for Ruben Garrick with his HIA. He'll be back next week. Robert Jennings is filling in for Tessie New, who is due back next week as well. Um, However, there is an option around if you wanted to bring these guys in to cash out these other guys. So say you want to trade Alamotti, Warbrick, sorry, out for Vega. You bank 150k. You can use that elsewhere, and then once Vega's played his first game, he won't be an auto emergency nightmare. So you will have like a dead rookie in your centre wing, but I think that is okay to carry one of those. Um, So yeah, so if you need the points this week, but then you want to, just have that dead rookie, you could do something like that. That's why he's the best buy out of those two traps. Option two, and this is probably the option I prefer, is to go with someone like a Tom Eisenhuth. Right, so you can see he's only averaging 43, which isn't great. He's going to slow burn some cash, but he does have that second row flexibility. So like I said, you could, potentially use him and then bring in a like a later on in the season, you could put him in the second row if you need to do something like that. It could be a good flip with someone like, Lemuelu if you like him, or Jack Bird, just to give your team that bit more flexibility. I know that's something I've suffered with so far this season. So, yeah, it's probably my preferred option, but obviously he's not going to make a lot of cash. Another option that's playing is Jaden Ockenbaugh, but he is a trap mostly because it looks like he's just going to play that utility bench position. Braden Burns is the one that's come into the side for Addo Carr. Um, so, yeah, I was hoping Ockenball would get that spot and make some cash, but, it looks like he's just going to be that, middle forward if required, edge forward if required, outside back if required, sort of jack of all trades. The other option, and thanks to, I think it's Mr. Callio, commented on my round review video. He said Jared Croker is an option, and I wasn't sure about it because I knew he was coming in. The Raiders had a few injuries, but having looked at it, um, I think the two that are a concern are Rapana and Savage, or Rapana, sorry, and Savage. Rapana's obviously a winger. Xavier Savage will move into fullback. So I think what will happen is when Savage comes back, then Sebastian Chris will move into the centres, and Croker might be the one that misses out. But until such time, I think he's got that spot. I saw Smith Shields and Schiller both in the reserve, so obviously Croker is favoured. He kicks goals, which is always a nice little boost to the score, although the Raiders haven't exactly been setting the world on fire and attack. Um, so I think, I've got the weight symbol on him just because he's only played the one game. You can wait another week. Um, so whereas Eisenhuth is on the bubble. So I was almost going to use the bubble symbol, but I just wanted to signify that, he's not going to make a lot of cash very quickly. So that's why I'd lean towards Eisenhuth this week, and then Croker's definitely one I'd like to use next week, I think, particularly for like a Khan Pereira sort of trade out. Tyrell Sloan, so he's the roller coaster. He was 85 or something last week, or 2 weeks ago. This last week, 11 or something like that. Um, yeah, so I think is it going to be a bit like that until he just puts the reps in. So, there's probably other people we want to trade out first before we worry too much about upgrading him. Hayes Dunster, put the weight on again. Just was looking at options. He's obviously the cheapest out of the options there, but only scored 7 last week. Bailey Simonson is due back next week, so you think he'd take that spot. Just wait and see what happens there. And then Warbrick and Alamotti are obviously both peaked in price. In terms of which one first, I'll probably go towards Alamotti just because of the higher break even. Um, and also, the Storm are starting to look better as a side. And Warbrick playing on that right edge outside of Eli Katoa. Jerome Hughes is back. Um, there's a bit more potential for another spike game, and he'll restart his cash gen. Um, so until I know a few of the troops are back this week for the Bulldogs, but Alamotti still made us 160k. Um, it would have been good if I traded him out last week instead of the Hammer, but that's just me raging about my side again. So yes, Alamotti first, then Warbrick. Next week, Khan Pereira will go straight to the top of that list. Um, you know, and Sloan is probably the last one to go. And on to the fullbacks. So I've got Jaden Campbell as the best buy. Obviously, if you've got a luxury to sort of play around with the fullback spot, it could be a good opportunity to make some sneaky cash. He played really well on the weekend. AJ Brimson's still a couple weeks away, uh, but you sort of hope that what you saw on the weekend with the Titans was that even though Kieran Foran wasn't playing, he's still a good influence around the side. And hopefully they realise that and keep him out of the side. He's playing this week, but Brimson could slide in at 5'8", I think, and play a similar sort of role. And Jaden Campbell, he's too good to be playing that utility role, I think. So that's a dream. I don't think it'll play out. They'll play Kieran for him, but I guess that's just what I'd hope. But I guess compared to the other options, he's quite cheap. So is worth a look if you're looking for a quick cash grab in that fullback position. Dylan Edwards, so now that Penrith's attack is back and firing, he does become a viable pot option. That 3 round average is boosted because of his 4 try effort last week. Don't expect that every week. But yeah, you'll see his averages there comparable with the rest of the guns. So you've got to include him in the conversation. Latrell, he showed why he's a gun. He's a bit up and down, but when he's up, he is well and truly up. So bring him in with confidence now whenever you want. Again, we talk about the fixture swing for South. That's definitely happening. Reece Walsh, he's still scoring well, even in a beaten side. So he's still a pot option. He's still got cash to make. Whether it's worth 2 trades if you're looking to cash grab from him and then go to Teddy or something, probably not. But if you're going to hold him, you certainly could. Will Kennedy, so always that pot option. He's probably always the bottom of the pot option list, but he's just consistent. You know what you're going to get from him every week, so we like that. Gutho, probably not so much, a bit more up and down, roller coaster style. So we'll pass on him. Turbo, so obviously a bit of a dip coming up in price, but he's a gun. Back spasm can happen to anyone. And Teddy and Drinkwater, I've got them in the same category. I'm just waiting on them because obviously they're massively negative or high break evens mean that they will drop in cash. So if you want to grab one of those in a few weeks, wouldn't be the worst shout. But anyway, I think that's finally it for the stock market video. If you've got any comments on players I might have missed or overlooked, feel free to let me know. As I said, I am trying to cull the list somewhat, and particularly the second row and the centre wings where there's quite a lot of guns. I'll start to really sort of classify them. Maybe top 5 or 6 for each one, just to make that a bit clearer. But yeah, if you're enjoying the stock market videos, feel free to give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel to see all the other content as well. And other than that, I'll catch you in the next one.